We are here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We're News Generation.
Bring news just for you. It's Friday, November 1st here in Seoul. I'm Song Yujin, and you're watching News Generation. Today, we're joined by Fabio Gonzalez.
Happy Friday.
And happy November.
Happy November.
Happy November. And Julian Kim.
Happy Friday and happy November.
Happy Friday and happy November. Now, both are here to speak on behalf of those in their 20s and 30s. So we're going to move on to our main discussion of today. It's Friday, time to explore topics and issues that resonate with young people around the world here on News Generation. Today's topic is tackling low birth rates, an issue we've covered before on the show multiple times. And with the situation becoming more urgent, it's time to take another look. So with birth rates dropping across the world, countries are scrambling to find ways to encourage young people to start families. So I want to ask you guys, first off, what's holding back young people from having children or thinking about starting a family?
Yeah, well, there are a plethora of reasons why young people are holding back from having children. So in summation, we are rightfully skeptical about raising children in an increasingly hostile and volatile world. This decision to postpone parenthood is heavily influenced by economic conditions, culture, and global situations. Now, many find the cost of living to be an increasing burden, and adding children to that equation would be extremely challenging for the MZ generation, who are already struggling to navigate such a fickle economy. We also only grew up knowing the climate crisis, and it's just getting worse. So in combination with all of that, there are also societal issues that do not really support new parents. For starters, there are deeper social issues such as gender discrimination, and also there is stigma against more non-traditional households. So ultimately, I believe that people who want to have children want to raise children in an environment where they feel safe and secure, and they can also see a bright future not only for themselves, but also for their children and future generations after that. Now, this topic can be contentious, but I think highlighting these issues is really important to enact change.
Right. So in short, we all want the best for our children, but because of so many issues that we're facing in our generation right now, such as climate change, discrimination, and rising prices, we're becoming more reluctant to start a family and give birth to children. So what could be some other reasons, Fabio?
Well, exactly. I agree. And I feel like as a whole, we have transformed our lifestyle into a more individualized experience. We shifted from being pressured by these traditional values to actually focusing on what we really want to do. And building a family and having kids is not seen as a necessity anymore. And it's actually overshadowed by other things like personal success and happiness, which are like the main priorities of young people. So when traditional values become social pressure, I feel like rather than functioning as a motivator, it becomes an annoyance. And when we add that to the strong economic pressure that most people have to deal with nowadays, we consequently see the birth rate decrease. And if we look at the screen, a Korean marriage company did a survey with unmarried Koreans, and among them, it was 1,000 American Koreans, and 40% of them stated that they didn't want kids, with the cost of childcare and future uncertainty being mentioned as the top reasons. But surprisingly, most young people are actually concerned about these low birth rates. They are aware that we have an aging population, and at some point, it would be unsustainable for young people to become the only active population that would have to sustain a majority inactive or retired older group. So young people are aware of the problem, but they are also reluctant to harm their own situation with the complications of having kids. So it's basically putting yourself first over the country's development and the country's growth.
Right. So this change in values among our generation when compared to the previous generations could be the reason why we are seeing dropping birth rates across the world. Now, before we discuss the issue even further, we're first going to invite an expert to help us understand the situation better. Today, we're joined by Lee Ha-yan, a research professor at the Humanities and Social Sciences Research Center of the Institute of EU Studies at Hankuk University of Foreign Studies. Welcome, Professor Lee, to the show.
Hello.
Good morning.
Thank you for me. Yeah.
Thank you for joining us, Professor. So our first question to you is, starting with South Korea, how severe is the birth rate issue right now, and what makes it especially concerning?
Currently, South Korea's low birth rate is a very serious issue, as you mentioned. It's just 0.72 in 2000 2003, Korea birth rate is less than half the OECD average and even lower than war-torn Ukraine. This decline isn't just about number, it has enormous implications for Korea's economy, society, and even national security. So if this trend continues, Korea's population could fall below 50 million by around 2040, posing significant challenges for economic growth and the sustainability of the pension system.
What are some of the limitations of Korea's current policies, and where do you see room for improvement?
Korea's lowest rate policies face limitations because they primarily rely on economic incentives like tax breaks and housing benefits without addressing deeper social and cultural factors. While financial support is helpful, it doesn't fundamentally change perceptions around marriage and parenthood. To make a real impact, Korea needs policies that promote work-life balance, shared parenting, and supportive social culture, recognizing the evolving values of the young generation. Structural change in workplace norms and gender roles in parenting are essential for any lasting improvement in birth rates.
Great. So, Professor, in your opinion, what practical solutions would encourage more young people to have children?
In my opinion, young people today feel a significant burden when it comes to the idea of marriage and starting a family. With high living costs and intense competition, relationship and marriage often seems like unnecessary or difficult choice. So this perception pushes marriage and childbirth rate even further out of reach. And I believe it's an issue that financial support alone can't fully resolve. So I think what I just mentioned aligns with what you've been discussing before. I believe it's most important to create a society where married people are happier than those who aren't, and couples with children are happier than those without. Lastly, promoting positive perceptions around family life, those supporting policies and awareness campaign can help foster a culture where family is seen as a rewarding goal. It's my opinion.
Hope we can foster that culture and environment. All right, Professor Lee, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much.
Thank you. Right, so I want to ask the same question to our panelists. Let's now talk about some practical solutions that could actually encourage our generation to have children. So we've prepared a short O and X session, so please raise the O and X sign, depending on whether these measures would motivate you to start a family. So let's go with the first question. Practical and continuous financial support. Do you think this will be enough to encourage you to start a family? What do you think? So Fabio chose O and Julian chose X.
Yes.
Let's start with Fabio.
For me, it would be important to have that support. It wouldn't be a deal breaker. I feel like there are other important things that I should take into consideration, but obviously financial support for me would be very important.
It's really important.
Yes.
Right, because you can't really nurture a child without financial stability, right?
Exactly, and as we just saw in the survey, one of the main reasons why people didn't want to have kids is
Financial
just like
pressure.
Financial pressure, exactly.
Then Julian, why did you choose X?
So I do agree that a financial support from the government will alleviate many financial burdens for families. I think that is just adding a band-aid to the solution. I feel like we need to put more effort towards creating a stable job market where people can feel secure in their jobs and feel they can grow professionally. So I think implementing systems where people can individually support their family themselves without having to be necessarily reliant on a government would be beneficial.
So kind of creating a self-sustaining environment,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
Okay. Now let's move on to the second question. Number 2, government programs offering affordable access to nannies or housekeepers to help with childcare and household tasks. 1, 2, 3. So Fabio X,
Not
Julian
really.
X, both X. So why?
Interesting idea. Like, I didn't really expect this kind of question, but I feel like it's a great service if you need it. So I would prefer it to just be something that the couple would get to choose, not necessarily something that is just available for everyone, because it goes case by case, I guess.
So you would rather opt for a more catered support?
Exactly, yes. I feel like family comes first, and then those extra help, that kind of extra help would come in second place.
What about you, Julian?
So I honestly didn't think this was like something the government would like think to focus on. But again, I feel like it's like the same point as I mentioned earlier. People are struggling to access affordable housing, especially young people. So I feel like if we actually put an effort towards like making like a system again to allow people to have access to affordable housing, that will have a much more impact on birth rates than nannies and housekeeping services that aren't even necessarily free either.
So you think something else should be prioritized. For example, housing, which is a more bigger concern for a generation.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, number 3, guaranteed maternity or paternity leave, even if unpaid. 1, 2, 3. O and O. Why?
Again, it's not the most important thing for me. I feel like work conditions are important, but among them, I feel like if you're deciding whether or not to have kids, you know, being able to actually have a parental leave would be necessary.
Especially when the baby is very young.
Exactly. I feel like if you're working in a company and you have that possibility, it would be easier for you to actually go to the next level.
Right, so having that option, right?
Exactly.
What about you, Julian?
So I agree completely. I think working conditions is something we should be like focusing on. But I think guaranteed parental leave in general is actually like an effort towards bettering working conditions for people who want to raise children. And I especially think it's important to emphasize like paternal leave too, culturally, because I feel it's just not as accepted. And so while I do think that parental leave should be paid, I think that as long as people feel secure in their job and they can feel like they can take a parental leave that's guaranteed, I think it'd be beneficial.
Right, and especially as many mothers are now working when compared to the past, I think especially guaranteeing both maternity and paternity leave is important. Now, we're also going to listen to our viewers. So based on the statistic Fabio mentioned earlier, financial pressure still seems to be the #1 factor that's making our generation reluctant to have children. So we asked our viewers whether financial support would encourage them to have children. So we did a survey between October 24th and 30th with a question, would you consider having children if more economic support measures were in place? Among the 605 votes, 66% of our respondents said yes, while 34% said no. And here are some of the comments given by our viewers. I would say yes, and the reason is I should like to deeply consider having a child, and giving economic solutions will be better if we follow every objective. Another comment said, I can't afford a house, so I will not be bringing up any children in poverty. Our last comment, yes, but other quality of life factors such as reducing weekly working hours and minimizing career interruptions should also be addressed. So financial support does seem to be helpful in motivating our generation to start a family, but of course there are other diverse support that our generation is wanting as well. So let's now expand our discussion and take a look at the situation in other countries, because once again the low birth rate isn't just a concern here in Korea, with many countries struggling with similar challenges. So what kind of policies, Fabio, are other countries implementing, and have there been any successful ones?
Well, you see, I come from Spain, right? And the European Union also faces a very low natality rate.
Right.
Spain has the second lowest after Malta. And they show a very huge gap between the amount of kids people want and the ones they actually have. And the problem grows bigger, with many claiming that we are currently facing a demographic suicide. And I tried doing some research on these policies on the EU, but I couldn't find many that actually had relevant impact, which shows that current measures that put effort on actually tackling this problem, although sometimes successful, are not sufficient enough. And this may be because having kids is such a life-changing decision that it's not that easy to just decide to have them because you have monetary support or because your work conditions have improved. I feel like it goes beyond that. Obviously, we talked about economic pressure. That is important, but I think that there's also a problem with values.
Right. For example, career-wise and so much more.
Career-wise, professionally, mentally too. I feel like mental health and having a stable position in your life and really achieving what you really wanted is kind of like a first step to actually find stability and take it to the next level.
Right, so much to consider when you're deciding to start a family or not. Now, what could be some other examples from other parts of the world, Julian?
Yeah, so many countries are implementing policies in an effort to increase natality rates. According to The Lancet, by 2050, over 3/4 of countries will not have high enough fertility rates to sustain population size over time. So in response, many countries are actively putting an effort to increase their low birth rates. European countries such as Sweden, France, and Germany offer some sort of family benefit where parents can get parental leave and even financial support. Similarly, Singapore offers parents a baby bonus, which is a cash gift upon the birth of their child. So while the success of these initiatives is mixed, many of these countries have seen some slight increase in their natality rates. However, it is hard to say that there is a significant impact based from these policies alone.
And I think this is especially true because these policies have been implemented for a short amount of time because low birth rate, we've been struggling with this issue not for a long time, not for decades. It's become a serious issue over the decades, but now I think it's not been long since a lot of countries started rolling up their sleeves and coming up with more solutions. So I think we'll have to wait and see whether these measures are effective. Now, ending off today's episode, I think this is a really important question for us to consider. As mentioned earlier, we've talked about low birth rate issues a lot on NewsGen, but I kind of wonder, is the low birth rate a matter of insufficient support, or does it indicate a shift in values among our generation? Because both of you guys mentioned it, but compared to previous generations, it seems like many young people today are less inclined to have children, regardless of whether there's more support or not. So I want to end off by asking, do you think boosting or overcoming the low birth rate is possible?
I think measures like having better support is important for people that do want to have kids. But sometimes in our current state, I feel like their situation doesn't allow that to be a priority. But honestly, if I'm super honest, just thinking about my environment, the people that I surround myself with, and people my age overall, I feel like they just don't want to have kids. Most of them. Or even if they think about the idea, it doesn't become a main goal or a main priority.
Why would be some of the reasons behind that?
I feel like they have motivations, motivations, and they want to, they are ambitious about their professional career and they want to do a lot of things, and they don't see themselves carrying or building a family until they reach that success, which might or might not come. So it really becomes a dilemma of where do I stop my tracks to actually settle up.
And what do I define as success?
Exactly, because if I think about myself, I'm 23 years old. I see kids as a very distant issue to ponder about. And no monetary support could actually buy me into having to stop my career, stop my studies, and actually start a family, because it really makes you stop for a while.
Right.
You really need that time to settle down and take care of that child. So I feel like it's very important to actually think about it. And I feel like relationship dynamics are also becoming more diverse these days, and people are very wary about who they spend their time with. And so I feel like that also plays a big part. Obviously, we can talk about marriage too. People are not marrying that much, but outside of that, I feel like you really, if you're building a family with another person and you want to have kids, then you really need to see that person as someone who you're going to spend most of your time with.
Your lifelong partner.
If it's not going to be long lasting, it might bring a lot of problems, especially to the child. So that's also something to ponder about. There's so many things to take into consideration when we talk about kids, and all of them are very important. So obviously, I feel like low birth rate, they really mean a huge problem for the country development. It is a problem overall to society, but it's not a problem that concerns us in an individual level. For me, it is not my problem. It is a problem of my country. So that becomes a dilemma of what should I do? Should I just focus on myself, or should I focus on the big picture?
Right. So it's definitely a tricky question to consider and answer. Now, what are your thoughts on this, Julian?
Yeah, everything that Fabio said, I completely agree. And I do believe that there is a shift in value amongst young people with how they want to live their lives. Actually, I just found out recently that this might be a term popular in America, but there is an acronym called DINK, which stands for Dual Income No Kids, and they also have something called DINKWAD, which is Dual Income No Kids with a Dog. Yeah, so this acronym highlights that many millennials and Gen Z individuals prioritize financial security and hold evolving attitudes toward parenthood. So while I think it's possible to address declining birth rates, this issue is complex and requires navigating a multitude of reasons of why people are not having children.
Right.
So, as Fabio mentioned, it is important to respect people's individual choices regarding parenthood, as these decisions are deeply personal and influenced by a whole variety of factors. However, many people who desire to have children, they simply feel they can't afford to have them. If governments around the world genuinely want to foster change, I strongly implore them to listen to young people. We want to financially support ourselves comfortably and feel safe to raise families. We want to raise children in a world where people are free from discrimination based on race, gender, sexuality, and socioeconomic class. Establishing these systems that allow individuals to create the necessary environment for raising a family is crucial, I believe. So, if we can see that genuine efforts to address societal and economic issues as well as tackling climate change, we can see, I believe that we can see an actual change in lower birth rates because this issue is heavily weighing on our shoulders right now.
Right, we do have a lot on our shoulders, and we'll bring more relevant discussions here on News 10 until we find that answer to the question. And that's all from us today, but News 10 will be back next Monday at 10:30 a.m. Korea time. Special thanks today to Fabio Gonzalez.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And Julian Kim.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for watching, and hope you have a nice weekend. We are
News Generation.